My name is Cedric, 34 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. I put myself through college, built a successful career in software engineering, and for 5 years, I paid my parents' mortgage to keep a roof over their heads. Then they gave that very house to my sister as a wedding gift. When they showed up at my vacation property uninvited, I refused them entry. Next thing I knew, cops were calling me. Before I get into how my own parents betrayed me, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I finally stood up for myself. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Michigan. My parents, Richard and Martha, weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided what they could. Dad ran a small print shop that did okay until digital media started taking over, while Mom worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office. We never went hungry, but I remember the hushed arguments about bills and the constant refrain of, "We can't afford that right now." The dynamics in our family were crystal clear from early on. My younger sister Amanda, who's 26 now, was always the golden child. While I was expected to be responsible, get good grades, and help around the house, Amanda somehow floated through life on charm and excuses. When I got a B+, there were questions about why it wasn't an A. When Amanda got a C-, there were celebrations that she'd passed at all. I started working when I was 15, bagging groceries after school and on weekends. By 17, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs while maintaining honor roll status. Nobody handed me anything. Every dollar for college came from either my own sweat or scholarships I earned through countless late nights studying while Amanda was out at parties. College was a brutal 4 years of working multiple jobs while carrying a full course load in computer science. I lived off ramen and coffee, shared a cramped apartment with 3 other guys, and still managed to graduate with honors. After graduation, I started as a junior developer at a tech startup, making barely enough to cover rent and student loan payments. But I was determined to succeed. Over the next decade, I climbed the ladder through sheer persistence. Junior developer to senior developer to now a senior software engineer at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the country. I went from that cramped apartment to a decent 1-bedroom, then eventually to a comfortable condo in the city. 3 years ago, I was finally able to buy my dream property, a small but beautiful lake house, about 3 hours from the city. Nothing extravagant, just a peaceful 2-bedroom retreat where I could escape on weekends, clear my head, and recharge. That place represented everything I'd worked for, my sanctuary earned through years of sacrifice. Meanwhile, my sister Amanda bounced from major to major in college, taking 6 years to finish a 4-year degree in communications. She cycled through jobs every few months. Too boring, too demanding, not fulfilling enough. Each time she quit, my parents would cover her rent until she found something new. Each time she wanted to find herself through expensive trips abroad, somehow the money appeared. I watched this pattern repeat for years, biting my tongue to keep family peace. About 5 years ago, my father's business finally collapsed under the weight of digital competition. At 62, he wasn't prepared for retirement. They'd saved barely anything, having spent decades prioritizing immediate wants over future security. Their mortgage, which they'd refinanced multiple times to pay for renovations they couldn't afford and to bail out Amanda from various financial crises, was nowhere near paid off. When Dad called me, voice cracking as he admitted they might lose the house, I didn't hesitate. "I'll help," I said. "Send me the mortgage details." The amount shocked me. They owed far more than I expected on a house they'd owned for over 30 years. But they were my parents. I couldn't let them become homeless. We made what I thought was a clear agreement. I would take over their $3,000 monthly mortgage payments temporarily while they got back on their feet. Dad would look for work. Mom would pick up more hours, and they'd eventually resume payments. We also discussed, though it wasn't written down, that since I was essentially investing in the house, I would inherit it eventually. "This house will be yours someday," Dad had said. "You're saving it for the family." For 5 years, I faithfully transferred $3,000 each month to their account, $60,000 annually, $300,000 total. Never once was a payment late. During this time, Dad found only sporadic part-time work, claiming jobs were scarce for someone his age. Mom increased her hours slightly but developed convenient back problems whenever discussions about them resuming payments came up. The family home itself wasn't impressive. A 3-bedroom ranch-style house built in the 70s with outdated kitchen appliances and carpeting that should have been replaced years ago. But it sat on a generous lot in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly as younger families moved in and renovated. Despite its dated interior, the house had nearly doubled in value over the past decade. While I was securing my parents' housing, Amanda was meeting Bradley, her future husband. Bradley came from money. His family owned a successful chain of car dealerships across 3 states. He was conventionally handsome in that preppy country club way, drove an imported sports car, and had never worked a real job in his life, instead holding a vague executive position in his father's company. Something about Bradley never sat right with me. Behind his perfect smile and designer clothes, I noticed how he subtly controlled everything around Amanda, where they went, who they saw, even what she ordered at restaurants. But Amanda was enamored, basking in the luxury lifestyle his credit cards provided. My parents were equally impressed, suddenly having access to country club events and upscale dinner parties through this new connection. When Amanda called with news of their engagement after just 8 months of dating, my parents were ecstatic. The wedding planning began immediately, with talk of a 200-person guest list, a designer gown, and a reception at the most exclusive venue in the area. I wondered silently who was funding this extravaganza, but kept my questions to myself. Family gatherings had become a minefield where any questioning of Amanda or Bradley was met with immediate defensive responses. Little did I know that their wedding plans would set in motion a betrayal I never saw coming. The night everything changed started innocently enough. Mom invited me over for a Sunday dinner, insisting the whole family needed to be together to discuss wedding details. I arrived with a decent bottle of wine, a small peace offering since tensions had been building between us over their continued financial dependence. From the moment I walked in, something felt off. Mom was excessively cheerful. Dad couldn't maintain eye contact, and Amanda kept exchanging secretive glances with Bradley. Throughout dinner, conversation remained superficial. Weather, local news, Amanda gushing about wedding flowers. I noticed my parents barely touched their food, Dad's fork pushing pasta around his plate, while Mom refilled her wine glass more frequently than usual. After dessert, Mom clasped her hands together and announced, "Cedric, we have wonderful news to share with you." Her voice carried an artificial brightness that immediately put me on edge. "We've been thinking about what we could give Amanda and Bradley as a wedding present," Dad continued, still avoiding my gaze. "Something really special to start their new life together." Mom jumped in, and we realized that we have something truly meaningful to offer. She reached for Amanda's hand across the table. "We've decided to give them the house." The words hit me like a physical blow. For several seconds, I couldn't speak, certain I'd misheard. "You're giving them this house?" I finally managed, pointing to the floor beneath us. "The house I've been paying the mortgage on for 5 years?" "Well, technically it's still our house," Dad said defensively. "Your name isn't on any documents. We know you've been helping with payments," Mom added quickly, "and we're so grateful. But Amanda and Bradley want to start a family soon, and they'll need the space." Amanda beamed. "It's perfect timing. The neighborhood is getting so trendy now. We're planning to renovate the kitchen first, then maybe knock down a wall to create an open floor plan." "What about our agreement?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Dad, you specifically said this house would be mine someday, that I was saving it for the family." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "I might have mentioned something like that, but it wasn't a formal agreement, and circumstances change. You're already established, Cedric. You have your condo, your lake house. Amanda's just starting out. Starting out? I repeated incredulously. She's marrying into a family with more money than we've ever had. They could buy 5 houses like this without blinking. Bradley cleared his throat. My parents believe in couples establishing themselves independently. So my independence doesn't matter? I pushed back. The $300,000 I've paid into this house just disappears? Mom flinched at the number. You make it sound so transactional. We're family. Families help each other without keeping score. That's rich, I said, laughing without humor. You've been keeping very careful score of everything I have versus what Amanda has. My success becomes the reason to give her more. You're being selfish, Amanda snapped. You don't even need this house. We do. Need? Or want? I challenged. There's a big difference. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. The decision is made. The house is ours to give, and we're giving it to your sister. If you were truly helping out of love rather than expecting something in return, you'd be happy for her. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. 5 years. 60 months of payments. Never missed one. And this is how you repay me? We didn't ask you to pay the whole mortgage, Dad said, his voice hardening. That was your choice. My choice? The room seemed to spin around me. You called me crying about losing the house. You said you had nowhere to go. And now we're making sure the house stays in the family, Mom interjected, with Amanda. In that moment, I saw my parents clearly, for perhaps the first time. The manipulation, the favoritism, the convenient rewriting of history to justify their choices. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. As of today, I will not be making any more mortgage payments. Not 1 cent. And when you can't make them yourselves, don't call me for help. I walked out despite their protests, Amanda calling after me that I was overreacting, Mom starting to cry, Dad demanding I come back and discuss this reasonably. I drove home in a fog of disbelief and betrayal. Over the next week, my phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from all 3 of them, messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. Mom's texts escalated from, "Please call us," to, "How could you abandon your family?" Dad left gruff voicemails about acting like an adult and not punishing your mother for this. Amanda vacillated between angry texts accusing me of jealousy and attempts at reconciliation that inevitably included phrases like, "You should be happy for me, and it's not about the money." When I finally spoke to Amanda, the conversation went exactly as I feared. She ambushed me outside my office building, clearly having waited for me to emerge. "You're being completely selfish," she hissed. "Mom's been crying for days." I'm selfish? That's rich, coming from someone who's taking a house I paid for. You didn't pay for it. You helped with some payments because you could afford to. That's what family does. Some payments? I laughed bitterly. $300,000 isn't some payments, Amanda. That's more than most people's college education. You always do this, she spat. Wave your money around like you're some kind of martyr. Not everyone is obsessed with careers and making money like you. No. Some people just expect others to hand them everything. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. You've always resented me. Just because Mom and Dad love me. This isn't about love. It's about basic fairness and honesty. Bradley says you're just bitter because you're alone while I'm starting a family. That was the final straw. Get Bradley's opinion out of my family business. And tell Mom and Dad the bank will be calling about the missed mortgage payment next week. I walked away as she called after me, her voice carrying across the parking garage. The betrayal settled into my bones, disrupting my sleep, clouding my thoughts during meetings, becoming a constant ache I couldn't shake. For the first time in my adult life, I missed deadlines at work. My performance review, previously stellar, noted concerns about my recent lack of focus. The mortgage company called my parents, as predicted when the payment didn't arrive. Within hours, my phone exploded with panicked messages. The bank called. What are we supposed to do? You can't just leave us hanging like this. I read them all but replied to none. The agreement was broken. The house was Amanda's problem now. I didn't attend the wedding. The ivory and gold invitation sat unopened on my counter until the RSVP deadline passed. Amanda sent increasingly desperate texts. You have to come. You can't miss your only sister's wedding. People will ask questions. I finally responded with a single line. Congratulations on your marriage and your new house. Instead of witnessing my sister's lavish ceremony, I buried myself in work. I took on additional projects, volunteered for weekend shifts, and stayed late debugging code no one else wanted to touch. My colleagues noticed the change but chalked it up to dedication rather than distraction. My boss was thrilled with my sudden availability, unaware it stemmed from avoiding an empty apartment filled with bitter thoughts. The calls started 3 days after the wedding. Family, friends, distant relatives, even my mother's bridge club members, all with the same question: why weren't you at Amanda's wedding? Each caller had already heard a version of events painting me as the villain, the jealous brother, the money-obsessed son who abandoned his parents over financial disagreements. I gave the same neutral response to everyone. It was a personal decision. Meanwhile, my parents scrambled to make the mortgage payment themselves. Dad took on a night security job despite his bad knee, and Mom picked up extra shifts, answering phones. They managed 2 payments before reality caught up with them. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday evening in October. I wasn't expecting anyone, and through the peephole, I was shocked to see both my parents standing in the hallway outside my condo. Mom clutching her purse, Dad looking simultaneously angry and desperate. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but finally opened the door without greeting them. "Can we come in?" Mom asked in a small voice. I stepped aside silently, allowing them into the living room but not offering refreshments or making small talk. They sat awkwardly on my couch while I remained standing. "We need to talk about the house situation," Dad began, his voice attempting authority but cracking slightly. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied evenly. "The house is Amanda's now. That was your decision." "That's not what we're here about," Mom said quickly. "It's about our living situation." Dad cleared his throat. "We can't keep up with the mortgage payments. Without your help, it's just not possible on our income." "That sounds like something you should discuss with Amanda and Bradley," I said, "since it's their house now." "They're just starting out," Mom protested. "They can't take on that financial burden yet." I waited, already seeing where this conversation was heading, but wanting them to say it explicitly. Dad finally continued. "We've been thinking. You have that lake house that you only use on weekends. It's sitting empty most of the time." The audacity nearly took my breath away. "Are you asking to move into my vacation property?" "Just temporarily," Mom said, leaning forward, "until we figure things out. We're family, Cedric. Families help each other." "Like you helped me by giving away the house I was paying for?" I asked quietly. "That's water under the bridge," Dad waved dismissively. "This is about now, about making sure your parents aren't homeless. Have you asked Amanda if you can stay with them?" I already knew the answer but wanted to hear them admit it. Mom looked away. "They're newlyweds. They need their space. In the 5-bedroom house you gave them," I pointed out. "The house with plenty of space. Bradley feels strongly about their privacy," Dad muttered. "So, let me get this straight," I said, pacing now. "You gave away the house I was financially supporting to Amanda. You expect me to be fine with that. Now that you can't afford the mortgage you committed to paying, instead of asking Amanda and her wealthy husband for help, you want to move into my personal property that I purchased with my own money. Is that correct?" "When you put it that way, you make it sound so cold." Mom's eyes welled with tears. "After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me?" I interrupted, my calm finally breaking. "I worked through high school and college. I paid my own way. I built my career without connections or handouts. Then I supported you for 5 years. What exactly am I missing here? We raised you, Dad shouted, standing now. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. That's what parents do. Yes, that's what parents are supposed to do. It's the bare minimum. It doesn't entitle you to everything I've worked for. So you're just going to let us struggle? Mom was fully crying now. Your own parents? I supported you for 5 years, I repeated. That support went to a house you gave to Amanda. I'm not setting myself on fire again to keep you warm. You'll regret this, Dad said, pointing a finger at me. When we're living in some terrible apartment in a dangerous neighborhood because our son was too selfish to help, you'll have to live with that. I've lived with being taken advantage of for years, I replied. I'm done with that now. The answer is no. You cannot move into my lake house. They left after more tears from Mom and threats from Dad. The door had barely closed behind them when my phone rang. Amanda, how dare you? She shrieked without preamble. They're your parents. They're in their 60s. And you won't even let them stay at a house you barely use? Why aren't they staying with you? I asked calmly. In the house they gave you. The house with plenty of room. That's completely different. Bradley and I are starting our lives together. We need our space. And I don't deserve my own space? The property I bought with my own money? They raised us, she protested, echoing Dad. Then take care of them, I countered. You got the house. You got the lavish wedding. You got everything. The responsibility comes with it. Bradley doesn't want. I don't care what Bradley wants. I cut her off. This is family business. You're being so selfish. Her voice broke. What are they supposed to do? They could start by asking their golden child and her wealthy husband for help, instead of the son they just betrayed. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. Later that evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Bradley. You're making a big mistake. Family takes care of family. I blocked the number without responding. What I learned later was that Amanda and Bradley had a 5-bedroom house with just the two of them living there, yet they'd flatly refused to let my parents move in. Bradley had apparently said his home was not a charity, and that having in-laws living with them would damage their marriage before it even started. The following week, I took time off work and drove the 3 hours to my lake house. After the confrontations with my family, I needed space to think, to breathe, to remind myself that I wasn't the unreasonable one in this situation. The small A-frame cabin wasn't luxurious by any standard, but it represented peace to me. Located on 3 acres with a private dock extending into the clear blue lake, it was my refuge from the world, the place I'd dreamed of during countless overtime hours and missed weekends. The 3-hour drive to the lake house had helped clear my head. Fall had painted the surrounding forests in brilliant reds and golds, and I'd rolled down the windows to breathe in the crisp air. By the time I turned onto the gravel road leading to my property, I felt the tension in my shoulders beginning to release. That feeling evaporated instantly when I rounded the final curve and saw my parents' aging blue sedan parked in my driveway. No, I whispered to myself. They wouldn't, but they had. As I pulled up behind their car, I saw movement at the kitchen window, my mother's silhouette disappearing behind the curtain I'd hung last summer. They'd broken into my house. I sat in my car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what was happening and how to respond without completely losing control. Finally, I grabbed my overnight bag and approached my own front door like an unwelcome visitor. I didn't knock. Using my key, I entered to find my parents sitting stiffly on my couch, surrounded by suitcases and cardboard boxes. "What are you doing in my house?" My voice was deadly quiet. Mom spoke first. "Cedric, please understand. We had nowhere else to go. How did you get in?" I demanded, though I already suspected the answer. Dad had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "We used the spare key under the boat shed. You showed us last summer, remember? That was for emergencies," I said. Not for you to move in against my explicit wishes. This is an emergency, Mom insisted. We couldn't make the mortgage payment. The bank sent a warning letter. I looked around, noticing more details that sent fury coursing through me. They hadn't just brought overnight bags. They'd brought framed photos, Dad's favorite recliner, kitchen appliances. They were moving in permanently. You need to leave, I said flatly. Now, son, be reasonable. Dad stood, attempting his authoritative posture that had intimidated me as a child but now seemed pathetic. It's getting dark. We can't drive back tonight. You managed to drive here. You can drive back. Where are we supposed to go? Mom's voice rose with panic. That's not my problem, I replied. You gave away the house I was paying for. You have a daughter with a 5-bedroom house. You have options that don't involve breaking into my property. We didn't break in, Dad protested. We used a key. A key you weren't given permission to use for this purpose. This is trespassing. You would call the police on your own parents? Mom gasped. The question hung in the air. Would I? Could I actually report my own parents for trespassing? The thought made my stomach turn, despite everything they'd done. I'm going for a drive, I finally said. When I get back in 2 hours, I expect you to be gone. If you're not, we'll see what the local sheriff has to say about this situation. I walked out, ignoring their protests, and drove to a small diner in town where I'd occasionally have breakfast during my stays. The elderly waitress recognized me, but sensing my mood, left me alone with my coffee after taking my order. I'd barely touched my food when my phone rang, a local number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Cedric Mitchell? A formal male voice asked. Yes. Who's this? Officer Daniels with the Lake County Sheriff's Department. We're currently at your property on Pinewood Drive. We've received a complaint about a disturbance. My blood ran cold. I'll be right there. The 15-minute drive back to my house felt endless. As I pulled up, I saw a police cruiser in the driveway, lights flashing. My parents stood outside, Mom crying, while talking to a uniformed officer, Dad gesturing emphatically. I approached cautiously, identifying myself to the second officer standing by the cruiser. Mr. Mitchell, can you explain what's happening here? Officer Daniels was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a carefully neutral expression. Before I could answer, my mother called out, Cedric, tell them there's been a misunderstanding. The first officer, an older man with gray at his temples, looked between us. Sir, these individuals claim they're your parents, and that you abandoned them after promising they could live here. That's absolutely false, I said firmly. This is my property, purchased solely by me 3 years ago. I never invited them to live here. In fact, I explicitly told them they could not stay here just days ago. He's lying, Dad shouted. This place was always meant to be a family property. We helped him buy it. I have all the documentation proving I purchased this property myself, I said, maintaining eye contact with Officer Daniels. I can show you the deed, mortgage documents, and bank statements showing every payment came from my personal account. The officers exchanged glances. If you could provide that documentation, that would help clarify things, the older one said. I retrieved the folder I fortunately kept at the lake house, containing all the property documents. As the officers reviewed them, my mother continued crying, now saying I was throwing them out on the street and that they only wanted to be close to their son. As you can see, I explained to the officers, this property is solely in my name. I've never received financial assistance from my parents for it. They entered using a spare key they knew about without my permission, after I explicitly told them they could not stay here. Officer Daniels nodded slowly. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, he addressed my parents. The documentation clearly shows this property belongs to your son. If he's asking you to leave, you need to comply. But we're family, Mom wailed. We have nowhere to go. I understand this is difficult, the older officer said sympathetically. But legally, your son has the right to determine who stays on his property. This is how you repay us for raising you? Dad's voice shook with rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. Calling the police on your own parents? I didn't call them, I pointed out. You did. The realization seemed to hit the officers then. My parents had called the police themselves, expecting them to force me to let them stay. The gambit had backfired spectacularly. We need to gather our things, Mom said, shoulders slumping in defeat. I'll help you pack up, I offered. Not out of kindness, but to ensure they didn't damage anything or decide to stay after the police left. The next hour passed in tense silence as my parents collected the belongings they'd brought. I stood watching, arms crossed, as Dad struggled to load his recliner back into their sedan. Mom wiped tears continuously, occasionally throwing wounded glances my way that might have worked years ago but now only hardened my resolve. As they prepared to leave, Mom made one last attempt. Cedric, please, we can work something out. We're still your parents. You stopped being parents I could trust when you gave away the house I was paying for, then expected me to solve your resulting financial problems. I replied quietly. Actions have consequences. Dad didn't speak, his face a mask of quiet rage as he started the car. Through the window, Mom mouthed, I love you, as they pulled away, and despite everything, I felt a pang of grief for the relationship we once had, or that I thought we had. I watched their taillights disappear down the gravel road, then went inside to change the locks and hide the spare key somewhere they'd never find it. Sitting alone in the silent house, I felt simultaneously justified and heartbroken. I'd stood my ground, protected what was mine, but at what cost? Returning to work after the lake house confrontation, I tried to resume normal life. I showed up early, stayed late, and buried myself in code, the one thing that still made sense to me. But normalcy remained elusive, as the fallout from my decision continued to ripple outward. My phone became a minefield of angry messages from extended family members. Aunt Cynthia, how could you put your parents out on the street? Uncle Robert, I never thought you'd turn your back on family. Cousin Stephanie, your parents are heartbroken. Is your vacation house really worth destroying your family? None of them knew the full story. Of course. They'd heard the carefully edited version where my generous parents gave their beloved daughter a wedding gift, then their ungrateful son refused to help them in their time of need. In this narrative, the $300,000 I'd contributed, the broken promises, and Amanda's refusal to house them herself were conveniently omitted. Amanda took the campaign public, posting thinly veiled references to me on social media. So blessed to have parents who gave us everything, while others turn their backs when it matters most. The posts accumulated likes and supportive comments from people who knew nothing about our family dynamics, each one a small dagger. My parents eventually moved in with my mother's cousin in a neighboring state, a temporary arrangement that my mother described in detailed texts as barely tolerable and humiliating at our age. Each message concluded with some variation of this could all be resolved if you'd just let us use the lake house until spring. I hadn't expected Bradley to get directly involved. So when he appeared at my office building lobby one Tuesday afternoon, I was caught completely off guard. We need to talk, he said, blocking my path to the elevators. Perfectly styled hair, designer suit, the confident posture of someone who'd never been told no in his life. I have nothing to say to you, I replied, attempting to step around him. He moved to block me again. This situation with your parents has gone on long enough. Amanda is upset, which means I'm upset. Your marital harmony isn't my concern. His expression hardened. Listen carefully. What you're doing constitutes elder abuse, denying shelter to elderly parents in need. There are laws against that sort of thing. I laughed, genuinely amused by the absurdity. First, my parents are in their 60s and perfectly capable of supporting themselves if they choose to. Second, I supported them financially for 5 years. Third, they have another child with a huge house. who's refused to take them in. So before you throw around legal terms you don't understand, maybe look closer to home." His face flushed with anger. "Amanda and I are newlyweds. We need our privacy. And I don't deserve privacy in the property I purchased myself?" "That's different," he insisted. "It's your responsibility to take care of your parents." Interesting perspective from someone who won't even house his in-laws temporarily in his 5-bedroom mansion. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Why aren't you supporting them financially, Bradley? With all your family money? Or is that reserved exclusively for Amanda's shopping sprees and your matching Rolexes?" He stepped back. "This conversation isn't over." "Actually, it is." I walked past him to the elevator. "And if you show up at my workplace again, I'll file for harassment." The confrontation with Bradley left me uneasy, not because I feared him, but because I sensed an escalation coming. I was right to be concerned. 3 days later, I received a call from the local police department. Not the sheriff near my lake house, but the city police where I lived. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Detective Rogers. We've received a complaint that we need to discuss with you. Could you come down to the station this afternoon?" My stomach dropped. What kind of complaint? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. "It's regarding your parents." I spent the drive to the police station running through possibilities, each worse than the last. Had something happened to them? Had they filed some kind of legal action against me? Detective Rogers was a stern woman in her 40s, who got straight to the point once I was seated in a small interview room. "Your parents have filed a complaint alleging you've been financially exploiting them," she began, watching my reaction closely. "They claim you've taken money from their accounts without permission, specifically their retirement savings." The accusation was so outlandish I laughed before I could stop myself. "That's completely false. I've never had access to their accounts. In fact, the opposite is true. I've been supporting them financially for years." I explained the entire situation: the mortgage payments, the house given to Amanda, the lake house confrontation. Detective Rogers took notes without comment, her expression remaining neutral. "Do you have documentation of these payments?" she asked when I finished. 5 years of bank statements showing transfers to their account, plus text messages confirming what the money was for. She nodded slowly. "Would you be willing to provide those?" "Absolutely. I have nothing to hide." 2 hours later, after reviewing my documentation and making several phone calls, Detective Rogers' demeanor had shifted noticeably. "Mr. Mitchell, based on the evidence you've provided and our preliminary investigation, we won't be pursuing charges against you." In fact, she hesitated. "I should inform you that filing false police reports is itself a crime." Relief washed over me. "Will you be charging my parents?" She sighed. "Given their age and the family circumstances, we're issuing a warning at this time. But the complaint will be noted as unfounded." As I drove home, the emotional toll of the past weeks crashed over me. I'd stood my ground, protected myself legally and financially, but at what cost? Sleep became elusive. Anxiety, a constant companion. At work, I maintained functionality but felt disconnected, going through motions without engagement. Friends noticed the change but received only vague explanations about family issues when they asked. My therapist, whom I finally called after a particularly bad night, helped put things in perspective. "You're experiencing a normal grief response," she explained. "Not just for the money or property, but for the relationship you thought you had with your parents, for the family you believed existed." "Am I wrong to hold my ground?" I asked. The question that had been haunting me. "Setting boundaries isn't wrong," she replied. "You've been in a caretaking role that's become exploitative. Breaking that pattern is painful but necessary." That conversation gave me enough clarity to recognize when Amanda showed up at my apartment door unannounced the following Saturday. "We need to talk," she said, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled as if she'd been sitting in her car for hours. I let her in cautiously, wondering if this was another ambush. "Bradley doesn't know I'm here," she began, pacing my living room. He'd be furious if he found out. "What do you want, Amanda?" She stopped pacing, looking suddenly deflated. "Mom and Dad asked to move in with us too, before they went to your lake house." This admission surprised me. "And?" Bradley said no. She looked away. "He said we weren't running a retirement home, and that it would ruin our newlywed phase. So you understand why I refused them too." She nodded reluctantly. "But they're still our parents, Cedric. We can't just leave them struggling." I noticed the shift from my problem to our problem, but didn't comment on it directly. "Why did you come here, Amanda? What do you actually want?" She hesitated. I thought, maybe we could split the cost of getting them an apartment? Something small but decent? Bradley won't help, but between you and me. And there it was. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement of the house they'd taken. Just another request for me to solve the problem, while everyone else continued living consequence-free. "Let me be clear," I said quietly. "You and our parents made decisions that created this situation. You took a house I paid for. You excluded me from your wedding. You tried to break into my property. Dad filed a false police report against me. And now you want me to keep funding their lifestyle? It sounds terrible when you put it that way," she protested. "It sounds accurate when I put it that way," I corrected her. "The pattern in our family has always been the same. I work and sacrifice, while you and our parents take and demand more. That pattern ends now." She left without the financial commitment she'd come for, but something in her expression as she walked out suggested the tiniest crack in her perspective, the first hint that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see the situation from my side. 2 weeks after Amanda's unexpected visit, I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor, Lauren. We'd worked together for years, and she'd helped me purchase both my condo and the lake house. She was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my financial support for my parents. "So let me make sure I understand correctly," Lauren said after I updated her on recent events. "You paid their mortgage for 5 years, totaling roughly $300,000, with no formal agreement in place." "Yes," I admitted. "It was a family arrangement. I trusted them." She nodded sympathetically. "Unfortunately, informal family arrangements are where I see people lose the most money. Have you considered whether you have any legal claim to a portion of the house?" I hadn't. The thought of taking legal action against my own family seemed extreme. Is that even possible? Potentially. There's a legal concept called unjust enrichment that might apply here. Essentially, when someone benefits financially at another person's expense in a way that's fundamentally unfair, she tapped her pen against her notepad. "The bigger issue I'm seeing is that your parents refinanced multiple times. The house is likely underwater." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means they owe more on the mortgage than the house is actually worth, despite the neighborhood appreciation. Those renovations they did, plus taking equity out to help your sister over the years. The numbers probably don't add up favorably." This revelation hit me hard. Not only had I spent years paying their mortgage, but the asset itself was worth less than what was owed on it. They hadn't just given Amanda a house. They'd given her a financial liability. "What would you recommend?" I asked. "First, document everything. Every payment, every text message, every conversation you can recall about the arrangement. Second, consult with an attorney who specializes in family financial disputes. They can advise whether pursuing a claim makes financial and emotional sense." I spent the next week meticulously organizing 5 years of bank statements, highlighting each mortgage payment, and compiling a spreadsheet totaling every dollar I'd contributed to my parents' finances. The final number shocked even me. $372,000, including the mortgage, property taxes I'd covered, and major repairs to their roof and HVAC system. The consultation with Diana, a family law attorney Lauren recommended, provided further clarity. "You do have potential legal claims here," Diana confirmed after reviewing my documentation. "But I want to be candid. Family lawsuits are emotionally draining and can destroy relationships permanently. Before we proceed, you need to be certain this is the path you want to take." Her words resonated with me. Despite everything, I didn't want to sue my parents. I didn't want that finality, that permanent rupture. "What if I don't pursue legal action?" I asked. "What's my best course forward?" Diana smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best legal strategy is avoiding legal action altogether. You've already taken the most important step by stopping the financial bleeding. Now it's about securing your future and deciding what kind of relationship, if any, you want with your family moving forward." That conversation with Diana sparked a pivotal meeting with my longtime mentor, Professor Jacobson. He'd guided me through college and remained a trusted advisor throughout my career. Over coffee in his university office, surrounded by books and academic papers, I laid out the entire situation. "I keep wondering if I'm being heartless," I admitted, after recounting the lake house confrontation. "They're still my parents." Professor Jacobson removed his glasses thoughtfully. "Cedric, you've always had a strong sense of duty. It's one of your finest qualities. But there's a difference between duty and martyrdom." "What do you mean?" "You fulfilled your duty as a son by helping when they were in need. You supported them financially for years. But martyrdom would be continuing to sacrifice your own well-being indefinitely while enabling their poor decisions." He leaned forward. "Standing up for yourself isn't heartless. It's necessary. But they're struggling now. Yes, as a consequence of choices they made. Breaking this cycle doesn't mean abandoning them entirely. It means establishing healthy boundaries and perhaps finding alternative ways to help that don't perpetuate the pattern." His words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. I didn't have to choose between complete self-sacrifice and total abandonment. There was a middle path. That evening, I drafted a lengthy email addressed to my parents, Amanda, Bradley, and several key extended family members who'd been involved in the situation. I spent hours crafting it, striking a balance between firmness and compassion, making sure every fact was accurately presented with dates and amounts where applicable. The email laid out exactly what had transpired over the past 5 years, including the total amount I had paid toward their mortgage and expenses, the verbal agreement regarding the house, their decision to give the house to Amanda without consulting me, their attempt to move into my lake house without permission, the false police report, Amanda and Bradley's refusal to house them. I concluded with a paragraph that took the longest to write. "I want to be clear that despite everything that's happened, you are still my family. I do not wish to see you struggling or homeless. What I cannot and will not do is continue enabling financial decisions that harm both you and me in the long run." Below, I've included information about several senior housing assistance programs available in your area, including subsidized apartments and financial counseling services. I'm willing to help you navigate these resources if you're interested. What I am not willing to do is provide direct financial support or housing any longer. I hope we can find a path forward that respects everyone's boundaries and needs. I didn't expect immediate results, and I didn't get them. My mother sent a tearful voicemail, accusing me of airing dirty laundry. Dad didn't respond at all, but several family members who had previously condemned me sent messages expressing newfound understanding of my position. While researching senior housing options for my parents, I discovered several programs they qualified for, but had never explored. Subsidized apartments specifically for seniors, utility assistance programs, even meal delivery services that could significantly reduce their monthly expenses. I compiled all this information into a comprehensive packet. The meeting I requested with my parents took place at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our locations. They arrived looking tired and noticeably older than just months before, the stress of their situation evident in new wrinkles and grayer hair. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, keeping my tone even. Dad nodded stiffly while Mom fidgeted with her napkin. "We're here. What do you want?" I placed a folder on the table between us. I've done some research into options that might help your situation. We don't need charity, Dad snapped. This isn't charity, I replied calmly. These are programs you qualify for based on your age and income. Resources you've been paying taxes toward your entire working life. Mom cautiously opened the folder, scanning the first page. Cedric, we don't want to live in some terrible government housing. That's a misconception, I explained. These senior communities are well maintained, secure, and specifically designed for people in your situation. Many have social activities, transportation services, and on-site maintenance. It's not what you're imagining. We shouldn't need this, Dad insisted. If you'd just... Dad, I interrupted gently, but firmly. I paid your mortgage for 5 years. That arrangement ended when you gave the house to Amanda. I'm not resuming financial support, but I am offering to help you find sustainable solutions. So you'll help fill out paperwork but not actually help, he scoffed. I'm offering assistance that doesn't perpetuate the cycle we've been stuck in, I corrected him. I've also included information about my consultation with an attorney regarding the funds I've already contributed to your house. That got their attention. Mom's eyes widened. You're suing us? I've chosen not to pursue legal action, I clarified. But I want you to understand that I could have. The money I contributed gives me legal standing to claim partial ownership of the house you gave to Amanda. I'm voluntarily relinquishing that claim in the interest of family peace, but that's a significant concession on my part. The conversation continued tensely, with Dad rejecting most suggestions outright while Mom at least looked through the materials. They left with the packet, Dad muttering that they would figure things out on their own, but Mom thanking me quietly as they walked away. I didn't expect immediate results, and I didn't get them. But 3 days later, I received a surprising call from Amanda. I read your email, she began without preamble. All of it. Okay. I replied neutrally, waiting. I didn't know. The total amount you paid. Mom and Dad never mentioned it was that much. $372,000, I confirmed. A long pause followed. That's more than my college education cost. More than our wedding. Yes. And they really promised you'd inherit the house? Multiple times. Yes. Another lengthy silence. I'm still processing all this. But I think I understand why you're so angry now. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A crack in the narrative. A glimpse of recognition. They're looking at that senior housing complex you found, she added. The one with the garden courtyard. Mom actually liked it when they drove by. That's good to hear. Bradley still won't help financially, she admitted. But I've been thinking about what I could contribute. The conversation ended without concrete resolutions. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps our family wasn't irreparably broken, just fundamentally changed. 3 months later, on a crisp spring morning, I helped carry the last box into my parents' new apartment at Willow Creek Senior Living. The one-bedroom unit was modest but bright, with large windows overlooking a well-maintained garden courtyard where residents gathered for morning coffee and evening social hours. The light is nice in here, I commented, placing the box labeled kitchen on the counter. Mom nodded, already arranging family photos on a bookshelf. It's growing on me, and the neighbors seem friendly. The journey to this moment had been far from smooth. After our coffee shop meeting, my parents had initially rejected all the options I'd presented, holding out hope for a different solution, perhaps Amanda changing her mind about housing them, or me relenting about the lake house. Reality eventually prevailed when their temporary housing with Mom's cousin came to an end, forcing them to confront their limited options. The senior living apartment required them to downsize significantly, selling furniture and belongings accumulated over decades. The process was painful but ultimately freeing, Mom admitted. The complex offered utilities included in the affordable rent, a meal program they could opt into on tight months, and maintenance staff who handled everything from leaky faucets to light bulb changes. Dad remained distant during the move, accepting my help with heavy lifting but maintaining minimal conversation. His pride had suffered the deepest wound, and healing would take longer, if it came at all. Mom, however, had begun the process of reconciliation, calling weekly with updates, acknowledging past mistakes in small ways, and expressing genuine interest in my life again. The community center has bridge games on Tuesdays, she told me as we unpacked kitchen items. I used to love playing bridge. You should join them, I encouraged. It would be good to make friends here. She hesitated. I was thinking, maybe you could come for dinner sometime next month. Once we're settled in, your father might be more himself by then. The invitation represented progress I hadn't dared hope for just months earlier. I'd like that, I replied honestly. Meanwhile, Amanda and Bradley's perfect newlywed life had hit unexpected turbulence. Bradley's family business faced financial difficulties following a lawsuit from a former employee, resulting in significant lifestyle adjustments. Their planned kitchen renovation was postponed indefinitely, and Bradley's luxury car was replaced with something more practical. Amanda called me regularly now, often seeking advice on budgeting and financial planning, skills she'd never needed to develop until their household income suddenly decreased. During one such call, she admitted something surprising. I'm actually glad we didn't let Mom and Dad move in with us, she confessed. Bradley and I are having enough problems adjusting to married life without that additional stress. I can't imagine how we would have managed. It's okay to acknowledge your limitations, I told her. Better than making promises you can't keep, like they did to you about the house, she said quietly. I get it now, Cedric. I really do. Though our relationship remained fragile, these conversations represented healing I'd once thought impossible. We were learning to be siblings as adults, without our parents' influence shaping our interactions. My own life had evolved significantly during these months. The promotion I'd been working toward came through once I was able to refocus on my career without family drama consuming my mental energy. The senior software architect position came with both increased responsibility and compensation, allowing me even greater financial security. More meaningful than professional success was the personal growth I'd experienced. Through therapy and reflection, I'd learned to recognize and dismantle the caretaking patterns established throughout my childhood. I'd discovered the difference between genuine generosity and codependent enabling. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing up for myself didn't make me selfish or uncaring. It made me healthy. This newfound clarity extended to my personal relationships. For years, I'd gravitated toward friends and romantic partners who needed fixing or rescuing, replicating my family dynamic in other areas of life. Recognizing this pattern allowed me to forge healthier connections, including a promising new relationship with Elena, a cybersecurity specialist I'd met at an industry conference. Unlike previous partners, Elena was self-sufficient, emotionally mature, and respected boundaries, qualities I now recognized as essential. The lake house, once a source of bitter conflict, regained its status as my sanctuary. I spent weekends there with Elena, teaching her to fish off the dock and watching sunsets from Adirondack chairs on the shore. The property that had symbolized family betrayal gradually transformed back into the peaceful retreat I'd originally envisioned. One unexpected development involved my sister's pregnancy announcement 6 months after their wedding. Despite my complicated feelings about becoming an uncle under these circumstances, I made a decision that surprised even me, establishing a college fund for my future niece or nephew. Why would you do that? Amanda asked when I told her. After everything that happened? Because breaking unhealthy patterns doesn't mean withholding love, I explained. I want different relationships with the next generation of our family. As I drove home from helping my parents settle into their new apartment, I reflected on the painful but necessary journey of the past year. I'd lost the idealized version of my family I'd clung to for decades, but gained something more valuable, authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The most profound lesson had been learning that generosity without boundaries isn't generosity at all. It's self-destruction. Real love, whether for family or oneself, requires honesty about what you can give without compromising your own well-being. Setting limits isn't selfish. It's the foundation of all healthy relationships. I pulled into my driveway as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my front yard. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace with my decisions and my place in the world. The weight of impossible expectations had lifted, replaced by the freedom that comes with authentic living. Family relationships will never be perfect. Some wounds heal completely, others leave scars that remind us where we've been. What matters is finding the courage to honor yourself while maintaining compassion for others, even when they've hurt you, even when they don't deserve it. The key to freedom, I discovered, isn't found in cutting people off or in martyring yourself for their benefit. It's found in the daily practice of saying yes to what nurtures you and no to what diminishes you, regardless of who's asking. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you balance maintaining relationships while protecting yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone going through something similar right now. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding peace on the other side. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to yourself.